Testing, testing. Okay, people are looking at me, so the mic works, which is good.
Sorry, brother. Please, मुझे भेजना pictures and I'll put it in the newsletter. Yeah, you did.
Thank you all. I was like, maybe if I just stand here in silence, they'll stop talking, and it works. So, good to know. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. Peace be upon all of you. My name is Bushra Amiwala. I'm currently an undergraduate sophomore at DePaul University, majoring in marketing and finance, with a double minor in community service studies and public policy studies. I personally never went to MEC or MCC through the Sunday school or through the day school, but I'm really glad that when I moved to Skokie when I was about 9 years old, I got involved through the masjid through many different other activities, hence why I'm here today. So as we explore the Golden Rule, we will hear many different interpretations of what that means and also see the universality of it through both a moral, spiritual, and religious context. With that being said, we will also celebrate this blessed month of Ramadan together by coming together and breaking our fast through the evening meal called Iftar. With that being said, I want to introduce our first speaker who will provide an Islamic perspective on the theme with a recitation and translation from the Quran, Imam Mufti Nazim Mangra. So at the age of 13, he went to England to complete the memorization of the Quran along with an Islamic scholar course and studied for 11 years and was the first of his class, number one. And he is a well-known speaker in community gatherings such as the one we have today. And he has 3 master's degrees in Arabic, Islamic studies, and Islamic jurisprudence. Fun fact, he has also visited 15 countries. So thank you.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace be upon all of you. So thank you so much for coming and taking part in this event. And we know that if we throw a party and nobody shows up, then we all feel bad. So thanks so much for being present here and giving us an opportunity to all of you and to all of us to share with each other this wonderful evening. Alhamdulillah wahda wa salatu wa salamu ala man la nabiyya ba'da. So we're gathered here to talk about the Golden Rule. So I'll be talking about this universal Golden Rule from an Islamic perspective. So Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, he narrates and he mentions in 2 books of Bukhari and Muslim, لا يؤمن أحدكم حتى يحب لأخيه ما يحب لنفسه. That none of you can be a true believer until you love for others what you love for yourself. So in this Islamic concept and Islamic aspect of this Golden Rule, it actually has the word love in it, the word hub or muhabba. And this is a very powerful word because when we treat other people with love, with this amazing sentiment, with this amazing feeling, then we treat each other as human beings and we don't treat each other as rivals. So this advice, even though it was directed to Muslims, but this advice, it is directed to every single human being because Prophet Muhammad, his teachings are universal and they can be implemented by anybody living in whichever century, whichever era. So this teaching of Prophet Muhammad that love for others, what we love for our own selves, this creates no barriers amongst the races and the genders and the colors and groups and ranks in implementing this amazing concept of brotherhood and sisterhood with love. When we have this love for the other person, the person in front of us, then all these barriers of hatred and animosity and dislike, they're removed because of realizing the importance of this wonderful concept. So one is the external barriers which might be in front of us because somebody looks different, somebody's color is different, somebody's nationality is different. Those are external barriers. And then the internal barriers is where we have this feeling of jealousy or hatred or superiority or anger. So all these are internal barriers which prevents us and which are detriments and which are hurdles for treating other people in the best of manners. So as we work to remove the external barriers, we also need to make an effort to remove the internal barriers and these wrong characteristics and traits. So when we implement this golden rule, then because of that, it's a reciprocal responsibility that we treat others how we want to be treated by others. So now, let me share some examples that when we make a mistake, it doesn't matter who we are. We're a husband, we're a wife, we're a parent, we're a child, we're an employee. When we make a mistake, how do you want other people to treat us? Right? How do we want other people to treat us when we make a mistake? So similarly, if somebody makes a mistake, and it is our responsibility to correct them, irrespective of if that person is our husband, our wife, our parents, our children, our employees, our siblings, our neighbors, anybody else. When we make a mistake, we want other people to point out our mistake, which is important, because when we're made to realize our mistake, then we become better human beings. But we want to be treated with honor, with dignity, with respect. We don't want to be belittled. We don't want to be mocked because of somebody making a comment of our lack of intellect. See, in life, it will always happen that we'll be better than somebody else in one way or another. One way or another will be better than somebody else, which is natural, which will happen. But when we make a mistake, we should treat other people the way that we want other people to point out our mistake. Or we forgot something, that how should we be talking to our wife, to our husband, to the people around us, to our children, to our parents. That if we forget something, we want to be treated with respect and with honor and with dignity. That how should we be talking to other people even though they might have a different color, they might be of different race, different language, you know, or let's just say, for example, that when we're going in a parking lot, that how should we park our car? You know, we want, when we see somebody not parked correctly, then we get annoyed naturally. So similarly, one of the best ways to correct ourselves is when we see people behaving in a certain manner and it annoys us, so we should make sure that we never do the same thing, and that's one amazing way of rectifying ourselves and making ourselves beloved by other people. So through this implementation of Prophet Muhammad, that love for others, what you love for your own self, through this implementation, then an egalitarian society and neighborhood is created because everybody is there for each other. Everybody is ready to do for others what they want to do for themselves. Everybody is ready to give preference to others over their own selves. And Prophet Muhammad, he created this society around him where people, they went themselves hungry and thirsty and they had less clothes, but they gave up their food, they gave up their water, they gave up their clothes, they gave up their shelter and clothing and things for other people. So throughout life, we will come across people. We will surely come across people who will look differently than us. They will wear different clothes than us. Their color will be different than us. Their nationality will be different than us. But just because somebody is different, that should not be the cause of us hurting somebody else emotionally. It should not be the cause for us to mistreat somebody just because somebody is different than us. It should not be the cause of oppressing somebody else. So that's why God mentions in the Quran that, oh human beings, we created you into nations and tribes, and we created you into males and females. For what purpose? Why has God created us differently? لِتَعَارَفُوا, so that we recognize each other. Right? If everybody looks the same, if everybody's color was the same, and there was no difference between each other, it would be so difficult for us to at least try to get an understanding of that person's background and race and color. So God created us differently, not that we hate each other, not that we oppress each other, not that we treat each other unfairly and justly. But we see all around the world, and not in any specific country, all around the world, we mistreat other people. Why? Because we might have a better job than them. We feel that I'm making more money than somebody else. We feel that because I'm the employer, because I'm above somebody, I'm this person, I'm that person, so I have a right to mistreat or to treat people unfairly, which is wrong. So Prophet Muhammad says in this Islamic version of the Golden Rule that love for others what you love for your own self. Now, we know that throughout the history of the world, there are different stories and allegories of how people helped out each other through this golden rule example. So one example is where people are all sitting on a table and there's food in front of them, and this is the allegory of the long spoons, that the people sitting around that table, they all had spoons, but the spoons were very, very long. So it was so long, the spoons were so long that even if you held it on your own, you just couldn't put it in your mouth because the spoons were really long. Or the other version is that people's hands, they were tied from here, so you couldn't bend your hand. So even if you had a spoon or whatever, fork in your hand, you can't feed yourself because like that. So they were trying to throw food and this and that into their mouths. Eventually they realized that if we want to be satiated with our hunger, then I will need to feed the other person, and that is what they eventually did, that they used the spoon or their hand straight. They started feeding each other, and that is how they had their own food. So the point here, once again, is that we treat other people how we want to be treated. So throughout the history of the world, we see that Prophet Muhammad, throughout his whole life, he never went to any non-Muslim just because they were non-Muslim and he shouted at them, he screamed at them, or he said to even one of non-Muslims that just because you're not a Muslim, I hate you, I'm going to attack you, I'm going to injure you. He never attacked one innocent person. He was never mean to one person, individual, civilian on the streets. Why? Because if we create this environment in our neighborhood, in our city, in our country, that we treat other people differently than us because our skin color is different, our nationality is different, our race is different. If we create that environment, then we all lose out because there's no safety, there's no security. I mean, we ourselves were already going through so much insecurity and loss of safety in our societies. A few months ago, overnight, our car was parked in the street, and I don't know how they got into our vehicle, but the person got into the vehicle and eventually went in and tore out the information screen and stole it. So next day I came and I see that the whole dashboard is all ripped apart and everything. And this happened at night, and I was just 5 minutes, I live 5 minutes away from here, so the policemen, they keep an eye on my street. So, just 5 minutes away from here. So eventually, Geico took care of it, and 15 minutes or less can save you hundreds of dollars. I'm not sponsored by Geico or something. So the point here is that, there's already a loss of safety in so many places around the world today. So this is another barrier which could be created. So that's why we have to learn how to treat each other, how we want to be treated by others. Now this doesn't apply in 100% cases, this golden rule, because let's just say, for example, a person is in jail. Now the person's going to say to, the person who's convicted of a crime is saying to the judge that, Judge, if you were in my position, you would want the judge to release you, so because of the golden rule, I want you to release me. So obviously it doesn't apply here because it's fair treatment. Or let's just say that I owe rent, $1,000 or something, or we say to the person, the owner of the house or the apartment, that if you were in my position, you would want the rent to be forgiven, so I want you to remit and forgive my rent. So obviously the golden rule doesn't apply here. Or the judge has to make decisions between two people, and both of them wish that the judge will make a decision on their behalf, and they say, oh judge, treat me how you would want another judge to treat you if you were in my position. So obviously that doesn't apply here because that's not what we call fair treatment, fairly expecting treatment from others. But whatever the case, we should always realize that just because we might be better, we might be stronger, we might be more powerful or whatever, it does not give us the right to oppress or mistreat others. So once again, thank you so much to all of you for coming here and sharing your wonderful evening with all of us. And we hope that this golden rule, we keep it in front of us so that when we go out for food, that we make sure that we leave some food for the person after us. Okay, so enjoy the evening and thank you so much and have a wonderful evening.
Thank you. Imam Mufti Nazim Magra. That was great. I think it's always nice to add a little humor in things, you know, so I tried as well, but people don't laugh as much when I say things like that. Oh, never mind, they do. But I think it's really nice that even though that was the Islamic perspective of it, the examples that he provided were very tangible and practical, and we all saw that that could apply to our own lives as well. Now, next we have our welcome address, which will be done by our MCC president, Dr. Kamran Hussein, to further ingrain in your minds the importance of the Golden Rule and to provide a non-partial sense of what that is. So, he was born in Chicago and has been literally raised in the walls of MCC, and his alma mater is Northwestern University, and is an optometrist by day, father to his son and 2 twin daughters. And after serving on the board of directors at the MCC and as a vice president for the past 5 years, we are honored to have him as our MCC president to create a more inclusive environment by tapping into our younger generation. So please give a warm welcome to Dr. Kamran Hussein.
Assalamu alaikum. May peace be among all of you. Dear respected guests, our speakers, Mufti Nazim Mangera, Sarah Trum, Keshava Das, Commander Susan Moss, Kara Wagner, Diane Lemus, and I guess Brandon doesn't have a last name. Brother Brandon. And all respected guests, board members, I welcome you all to the annual MCC Interfaith Outreach Iftar. I'm going to start my timer so make sure I don't go over. I appreciate all of you for taking your time out on a Saturday evening to spend the evening with us. I'd like to take this opportunity to tell you a little bit more about MCC and some of the things that we do here. MCC started out as in 1969 by a bunch of college students. And this student organization that has lasted 50 years has seen 3 generations come through its doors. Our elders were the first founding mothers and fathers. I am part of that middle generation, and our goal is to pass the MCC on to future generations of Muslims in the Chicagoland area. It consisted primarily of immigrants, and even today you can see that immigrants and descendants of immigrants are the ones that still make a huge part of the congregation. But that is changing, and that is the challenge that we have today. How to integrate the past with our future as Muslims in Chicago. We want to keep our core values, but also adapt to this ever-changing world that we live in. The founding fathers of MCC have emphasized through its bylaws that MCC is open and welcoming place for all Muslims regardless of gender, race, age, and nationality. Historically, most of our MCC presidents have been, like myself, of Indo-Pak background. Even though I like to claim myself as the first American-born president of the MCC, the truth of the matter is that in the mid-1990s, the MCC elected our first African-American president. May God have mercy on the soul of Brother Nikaniso Abdullah as he passed away not long after his presidency. I bring that up to point out that most of our membership at that time was elder Indo-Pak immigrants. So take that in for a moment. An African-American president was nominated mostly by an Indo-Pak immigrant community to lead them. This is what Islam is supposed to be, and this is what America is supposed to be. There are many sayings of the Prophet Muhammad, may peace be upon him, that the best among you is the one that has taqwa, the one that has God consciousness. Never does he mention race or gender or nationality or wealth. Nowadays we judge a lot of each other based on those criteria, but the Prophet, may peace be upon him, also always said that God consciousness is the one that you should judge your fellow brothers and sisters from. Now, there are differences between us. We also do have issues of misogyny, racism, bigotry, even within an institution like this, but we strive as Muslims and we strive as the MCC not to hold up, but we strive to live up to values of equality. The way we do that is by education and by giving. There are 2 things that I'm going to focus on, and as a religious organization, we are self-sufficient. Our resources are our people. We give the MCC and we try to give back to the community. You will come downstairs in a little bit and you will see us praying. We hold 5 congregational prayers every day, 365 days a year at both this mosque and our mosque in Morton Grove. This month is when Muslims are the most generous with their wealth and their time. After we break our fast, we will be standing for 2 hours, literally from 10 p.m. to about midnight in prayer. We also tend to give most of our charity this month. Muslims have a pillar called zakat. It is a mandatory charity that all Muslims who can afford to give from their savings to give every year. MCC is a vessel for that obligation. The first Saturday of every month through this type of charity, our rehab committee gives about $30,000 in charity to those who are in need. We also have teamed up with the Mental Health and Wellness Center that they screen our recipients and they offer services if they need any type of counseling. We have people coming from all walks of life, but you've noticed, if you watch the news, that in the last few years, the crisis in Syria and Burma, we have thousands of Syrian refugees and Burmese refugees that come to MCC when they need help. In addition, there are many local, national, and international charity organizations that MCC gives to. We give about $300,000 annually to different organizations, whether it be the Inner City Muslim Action Network in the south side of Chicago or Building Wells in East Africa. The MCC helps those that are in need. So if you calculate that up, we give about $500,000 annually to actual people or organizations that help people. This charitable fund is always has a constant cash flow because people are giving constantly, every day, every week, and especially during this month. We are helping people on the grassroots level by giving directly to people, but we're also helping strengthen other charitable organizations. We also offer other services in MCC that go beyond charity. The other aspect we want to focus in on is our education. We have an MCC Academy in Morton Grove and in Skokie, which is a full-time private school that has 2 campuses. And we have weekend schools right here and in Morton Grove. So overall, we have about 1,000 kids that get educated in these walls, either on a weekly or on a daily or a weekly basis. Although these schools are tuition-based, MCC always helps subsidize the tuition for those who are in need. MCC has plenty of committees that provide services to our members as well. We perform approximately about a marriage a week, about 50 marriages a year, and we take care of all the legal documentation. We also perform about 200 funerals a year. Most of the Muslims that pass away in this area, even if you never came to this mosque, you would probably get buried, you probably have your funeral services in this mosque. So, even if you've never come here, even if you have family that aren't Muslim, if you converted to Islam and you don't have any family that would require burial rights, you come to this mosque to get help. So in marriage and in death, MCC has got you covered. This iftar, this dinner that has been provided for you is the work of our Interfaith and Outreach Committee. And did you know this past year that the MCC's Interfaith and Outreach Committee won the Spirit Award of the Open Communities, the Open Community Spirit Award of 2018. Many people have passed through these walls, and they have been prominent local and national celebrities as well. I won't give MCC all the credit, but today I'm going to give MCC all the credit for their success. Our MC tonight, Sister Bushra, at such a young age got into the local political scene, running for Cook County Board of Commissioners. Sister Samina Mustafa, who's here, she can stand up. She also ran for Congress, state Congress as well. Oh, sorry. Oh, yeah, sorry. Is there a state Congress? Sister Dilara Saeed also ran for state representative. These are just three women out of the many numerous women that ran for elected office in these midterm elections. Changes made in the political arena slowly trickle down to the rest of us on the ground level. And if that just means just changing perception, we encourage our sisters to continue on that fight. One of NBC's local reporters, Ashraf Qureshi, is a product of MCC as well. When you don't see him on the news, you'll see him at Friday prayers. Azhar Usman, a comedian who has opened up for Dave Chappelle and also wrote jokes for Hassan Minhaj for the White House Correspondents' Dinner, is also an MCC Sunday School graduate. Dr. Hussein Sattar, an instructor at the University of Chicago's Pritzker School of Medicine, wrote a book called The Fundamentals of Pathology, which from what I hear is almost read by almost every single med student in the country. The funny thing is that most Muslims probably don't know that, but what they do know is that he is actually a nationally known religious scholar. Guess what? He also used to sit in the Sunday schools upstairs too. Rahim Almani and Bakir Dizanovic are MCC products that founded the not-for-profit organization, the Humanity Project, and last they built an orphanage in Haiti. So I kind of point out these, quote-unquote celebrities or quote-unquote famous people that came to the MCC, but finally I wanted to point out that everything that I've said would not be possible with all the hard work of the elder generation that really put their whole lives into making this mosque what it is today after 49 years. Next year we will be in existence for 50 years, and there are many of them that are here still with us today that will see the fruits of their labor. And they should be commended and recognized for their efforts and their wisdom to keep this mosque and its ideals the same over the past 50 years. yes, there are bumps in the road, and sometimes those ideals get a little, wavy, but the ideals of this mosque still coincide with the prophetic tradition. They put their homes for collateral when they needed to purchase the Moore and Grove building. They spent countless hours in meetings with village planning boards, countless hours going door to door in the 70s and 80s when there weren't that many Muslims asking for donations. Remember, this is the time before social media, the internet, GoFundMe, and all that things. They are faceless individuals that don't want recognition. Many of their younger generation don't know who they are. Many of them have passed on, but their efforts should always be in the back of our minds as we continue for the betterment of the MCC. So in conclusion, the MCC is a great institution. With all of its shortcomings, it's also a mainstay on the north side of Chicago, really with the whole Chicagoland community. God willing, we can do this again next year, and then I can come here and brag about some more stuff that we did in the past 50 years. So thank you, and have a good evening, and enjoy the dinner.
Thank you for that, Dr. Kamran Hussain. So before I introduce our next lineup of speakers, I believe the ex-dean of North Park University is in the room, Dr. Charles Peterson. Am I right? Where is he? Yeah, there he is. Thank you. Thank you so much for attending. Thank you. So again, we have a lineup of guest speakers who all wear many hats, so they don't just come from one organization, as you'll see as I introduce each of them respectively, but they have all been asked to share the golden rule and what that means to them and how it's in line with their community work, their faith practice, the interfaith work that they do. So I think we'll all be very well versed on this term by the end of it. As a quick heads up, I have this index card that says 1 minute on it. You probably can't see it, but once I'm waiting this, you know what it means. I have the unfortunate job of doing that because I would love to hear you all speak for hours as well. So our first speaker is Sarah Trum, who has served as the program coordinator at a Center of Christian-Muslim Engagement for Peace and Justice at the Luther School of Theology for almost 10 years now. And while always interested in cross-cultural education, during her East African experience in her undergraduate career, she studied, traveled, and worked in India for 1.5 years, where interfaith relations became a vital part of her cross-cultural experiences and education. She is now the community ambassador through the Interfaith Corps and has been working to promote cultural competency in many vicinities and that she's involved in. So please welcome Sarah Trum.
Ramadan Kareem. I'm so glad to be here with you tonight. And to give a perspective not only from my Christian faith, a little bit from my Lutheran faith, but also from the perspective of my life as a cross-cultural, even more generally than interfaith kind of perspective and work at the Lutheran School of Theology at Chicago. The Evangelical Lutheran Church in America is one of the whitest in the entire, in all religions. It's just, that's the way it is. And so we're always working very hard to try and open our minds to other perspectives, other ways of looking at things, not only interfaith, but interculturally and across races. So this is a real privilege for me to be able to talk about the golden rule in this process. So I'll start out with just a little bit of where the golden rule is talked about within our New Testament scriptures and actually state it. In everything, do to others as you would have them do to you, for this is the law and the prophets. That comes from Matthew, and this is in what's called the Sermon of the Mount, which a lot of people are very familiar with, because Jesus is summarizing really the main point of Scripture and the meaning of the message that he came to bring. And again, in Luke 6:31, there's a little more I'm going to share about that one. But I say to you that, listen, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, bless those who curse you, pray for those who abuse you. If anyone strikes you on the cheek, offer the other also. And from anyone who takes away your coat, do not withhold even your shirt. Do unto others as you would have them do to you. If you love those who love you, what credit is that to you? For even sinners love those who love them. But love your enemies, do good and lend, expecting nothing in return. Now I'm paraphrasing some of that, but you can see from there that not only does it talk about doing unto others as you would have done unto you, but Jesus also is talking about the opposite too. Don't do unto others as you don't want done unto you. I mean, it includes a generosity that is giving of your best without expectation of something in return. And I think those are very important. A lot of times in the Christian tradition, we talk about the golden rule alongside the story of the Good Samaritan who's caring for a stranger despite the risks he's making for himself, and caring for the stranger in trouble when others just passed him by. So yes, it goes back to scripture passages of loving your neighbor as you love yourself, Leviticus and in Galatians. So the thing that I've noticed is that when Jesus is talking about the golden rule in these texts, Jesus is speaking to a very polarized community in a very challenging context. So it's one where our base human urges are prevailing, and you're looking out for yourself and those who are most like you. It's maybe the places where the golden rule is meaning that those with the gold get to rule. And Jesus is talking to us at those kind of primal wants and needs, and it's a timeless message, and it ends up being very appropriate to our polarized nation today. One in which many people struggle to see the humanity in someone very different from them, where the other is demonized. A clear example is how the Islamophobia movement works very hard to portray an image of Muslims that is less than equal and less than human. To this, Jesus says no. We must see one another as fellow siblings, to respect and care for one another as if we were caring for ourselves or our loved ones. It goes a really long way in challenging us when we fear difference, when we simply want to separate ourselves from those who think or believe or act differently. And however, the golden rule only gets us so far as we aim for a truly loving and cohesive community. So this is where I kind of cross into my cross-cultural work. And I realize that there's often times when I'm trying to do unto others as I would want them to do unto me, and somehow we're just missing each other, and it goes all awry. I have to check my assumptions, because I think there's a lot of assumptions that happen within the golden rule that we have to watch out for. Do I really know what is good for someone else? Do they always want what I want? And you know, what am I basing those decisions about how I treat someone on? I was told a story about a young girl who studied abroad in Japan. She was a US white American, and she went to Japan to study. And while she was there for about a full semester, and she had gotten to know people really well, felt really like she fit in quite well, got to know some professors quite well. But just before she was supposed to be returning and finishing up her time there, her father passed away back in the States. And she had to leave a little bit early and very rushed. And so she was frantically trying to find out how to get what she needed to done before she left, and in a very traumatized state. She went to one of her beloved professors that she had gotten to know very well, and she started to tell him what was happening and find out what she needed to do and to say goodbye. And she started to cry. And her beloved professor turned his back to her and looked out the window and said, "We will figure out what we need to do later. Safe travels home. I wish you the best. I'm sorry for your loss." Didn't look at her. And she walked away, hurt, beyond belief. She thought they were closer than that, right? All sorts of things are going through her mind. What happened? And so she had to step aside. And so later she realized that for him, he was trying to save face for her. She was crying in front of someone that she respected, and he didn't want her to feel embarrassed by that. And so he turned his back to her to be kind, to be respectful, to care as much as he could for her. But they missed each other, right? This happens all the time. Dr. Milton Bennett, who holds a doctorate in intercultural communication and sociology and a master's degree in psycholinguistics, coined the term the platinum rule. And that basically states, do unto others as they would have you do unto them. He shows that this is largely a stance of sympathy. The golden rule is a stance of sympathy, where this is a stance of empathy. And so being able to connect, it prompts us to take the necessary time and expenditure of the required energy to engage in an actual relationship and understanding before attempting to act on behalf of the needs of others. There's examples of Jesus doing this in the Bible too, but Jesus trumps that even more. He ups the ante even further on all our human relationships with a new commandment given on what Christians recognize on Maundy Thursday, the night before he's to be crucified. Leonard Sweet calls this the titanium rule. I give you a new commandment, says Jesus, that you will love one another, just as I have loved you, and also you should love one another. By this, everyone will know that you are my disciples if you have love for one another like I do. So Jesus is saying this on the night that he eats his last meal. He's inviting his closest friends to celebrate the Passover meal with him, and he knows that most of these disciples and friends will deny him, sell him out, and run away when he needs them the most. If it were your last meal on earth, would you invite these so-called friends to join you? How do you face the most difficult and painful hardship of your life, knowing everyone who's close to you will fail you? Jesus not only shares a meal with them, but he kneels at their feet, takes the position of a slave, the lowest person on the very bottom rung of the social ladder, and he washes the feet of these fearful, fallible followers, to feet that will run away and abandon him. To love Jesus as Jesus loves is to serve those who fail you, to embrace the ones who hurt you, and to indulge the ones who don't show up when you need them the most. Jesus already knows that everyone will abandon, deny, and betray him in one way or another. Yet Jesus says, come, let me serve you with my very life. Let me love you, even and most especially your fallible, feeble, fearful souls. And then pass it on, pay it forward. Let someone see that I love them because you show up to serve, to love, and to forgive. Jesus says, love as I love you. Go and pass it on.
Direct quote that you mentioned in the beginning, I thought it really helped put things into perspective. And I want to introduce our next speaker, Keshava Das from the International Society of Krishna Consciousness. Our next speaker was born and raised in Colombia, South America, in a Catholic family with strong Jewish roots. After constantly wondering about God and looking for answers, Carlos Camaro, who the name he used to go by, moved to Chicago about 20 years ago, and he is now initiated into the Vaishnava tradition under the spiritual name of Keshava Krishna Das. Where is he? There he is. Come on up.
I'm frozen. Not because of the COVID. Assalamu alaikum. Hare Krishna. Well, thank you for having me, sharing with such exalted people, something that for us is truly important. I'm going to start with a little story, and the way every story begins. Once upon a time, many years ago, when this era of quarrel and disagreements and conflict began, or was about to begin, in India, in a place called Naimasaranya, there were a bunch of sages and rishis and wise men wondering what to do, how to counteract this situation that was foreseen already. And they started asking questions to the most exalted Goswami, the person that was the authority there. His name was Sutta Goswami. And the answer was this one: Sabai pansam parodharmo yato bhakti alokshate ahe tuki apraitarya yatma suprasyadati. Translation by His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada. The supreme occupation, dharma, for all humanity is that by which men can attain to loving devotional service unto the transcendent Lord. Such devotional service must be unmotivated, uninterrupted, to completely satisfy the self. There are two paths in our lives. One is called Pravriti Marga, which is the path for self-enjoyment. When we are conscious that we are this body, we're prone to have greed, anger, lust, envy, and to have a strong ego. We're not this body. We're not a body with a soul. We're a soul, an eternal soul with a body. It's like a car that we're going to dispose later on down the road. But we're eternal. That is why we are made at the image of God, who's eternal. And the other one, the Navritri Marga, which is the spiritual path of renunciation. Renunciation is not like just leave everything behind, but to understand that our senses are taking us down into a path that will not permit us to attain salvation and attain the grace of God. Treat others the way we want to be treated. When we are attached to this body, we are thinking, oh, I'm Colombian, I am Indian, I am American, I am black, I am white, I'm a doctor, I'm a postdoctorate, I'm a philosopher. But the important thing, it is not that. Yeah, that works in a society that is the consumerism, but when we are in looking for our transcendental nature, our true essence, that is that loving service to God, we're going to forget what is called in Sanskrit upadhis, what I was telling you. We don't see that we're black or we're Muslims or we're anything. If we are truly and honestly following the path and giving our best to God, our relationships with the rest of the world and the rest of this, okay, I forgot even the word in Spanish. I'm frozen. This material world, this material universe, we cannot see what is the transcendence in our life, and the Lord as a transcendental path to get and attain that salvation and that love that we need to have. We were born to love and to be loved. That is a truth. And when we get that healing and love, that redeeming love, our relationships with our co-workers, with our neighbors, with all the creatures in this planet, that is the only home we have, they are going to change, necessarily. His Divine Grace, Srila Prabhupada, the founder Acharya of ISKCON Chicago, who was coming from a Vaishnava tradition called Sanatana Dharma, said, there's no one scripture that will bring salvation. It doesn't matter if it is the Quran or the Bible or the Torah or anything. As long as we are good Catholics or good Christians or good Muslims or good Hindus is what is important. That is the whole thing. We need to understand our transcendental position that is to love God in order to get away of those greed, anger, lust, things that not permit us to have nice relationships with the rest. Thank you for hearing me.
Thank you, Keshava Das, for that spiritual lens of the Golden Rule, and really for teaching us that when you follow the Golden Rule, it also translates to means of being humble and more aware of yourself and less aware of these worldly things. Before I introduce our next speaker, I want to give a shout out to Mr. Robert Murphy. He's the 39th Ward Democratic Committeeman. Where is he? Stand up, come on, don't be shy. Let's all clap for it, yay! Thank you for joining us today. I know you have a very busy schedule and for representing a new wave of leadership in Chicago's Northwest Side. And our next speaker is Commander Susan Moss from the Police Commander, District 17. I'm actually sitting next to her, so she's seen the way I waved the card, so she told me not to worry about time, so this should be good. Susan Moss, again, is the Police Commander of District 17, and she's been in the department since 1986 for 32 years. To put things into perspective, I am 20 years old, so thank you. Thank you for being a lifelong public servant. And Susan notes how she could have retired, but she chooses to remain extremely involved while being the commander for District 11, 12, 13, and the new 12th, and now here she is the 17th, because she enjoys working and interacting with people. So please join us.
Thank you. It's an honor to be here tonight, and I want to thank her for the promotion that she said that I was the commander of all those other districts. I was just promoted to commander in February. The other districts that she mentioned I had just served in various ranks. And first off, I would like to introduce my two officers that are with me, Officer Hamid and Officer Askar. They both work in the 17th district. They both work in the 17th District CAPS office, and without them, my transition to commander would be not as nice as it has been. And I would also like everyone to give a round of applause for Officer Askar, who's been recently promoted to detective. So unfortunately, we are losing him here in the 17th District, but it is a proud thing. I would like to preface my time here at the podium by apologizing that I don't really have a prepared speech made. I was planning on doing it this morning over a cup of coffee in my pajamas and write it and, rehearse it. But unfortunately, at 9 o'clock in the morning, I received a call that there was an alleged HBT incident, a hostage barricade incident in the 17th district. You may have heard it on the news up on Peterson, to which I had to respond. That incident, the SWAT team responded, and it took over 5 hours for it to be resolved. And currently, the officers who were responding to it are still in the station writing paper for this incident. But it's kind of a good segue in that we did not rush into the scene, and that's kind of how we as police officers need to apply the golden rule for those of us who don't. But it's the golden rule as far as policing, it applies to every action a police officer takes. Had we had rushed into that scene, we don't know what we would have met behind those closed doors. So it was a step-by-step process, and mind you, it was very long and very trying, and I had to have somebody bring me a cup of coffee to the scene because I had not even yet finished my first cup of coffee this morning when I left, and believe me, I ran out of there, and I sorely needed my caffeine fix in the morning. But how we respond to scenes when we're called to as police officers, it is important. I'm kind of flustered here too. So how do police officers practice the golden rule? The way I see it and the way I've always tried to conduct my personal self in responding to scenes is looking at it that we are responding to someone, to our loved ones. Because people don't call the police because they want to see us because they're happy. So as a law enforcement officer, we know we are probably not going to be met with the golden rule a lot of the times. We're being called to a scene because somebody is sad, somebody's upset, somebody's angry, they've been a victim of a crime, somebody's dying, somebody's been shot. They have a heightened, heightened emotion going on. We're not going there so they could say, oh hi, we're glad to see you. But as officers, we need to respond that every person we encounter is a loved one. If we want to be respected as law enforcement officers, we must show respect to the citizens to which we are serving. For instance, say there's a person shot in a scene, and we all know, Officer Askew, Officer Meade, and myself, we all know that when we get called to a scene, there's certain officers we don't want to respond to the scene with us, because they will only escalate it. Whether those officers are just having a bad day, or they've just had years of trauma, that they've seen it over years and years and years, and it's just affected them and it's made it biased. Whatever the response is, there are officers that we don't want to come to certain scenes, but sometimes they do. But when I always responded to a shooting incident, we have to show compassion and empathy. We don't want to, push the people away. Step back, say it with kindness, because we don't know what the relationship they have with these people who have been injured or hurt are. An incident that I had when I first came on the job, I think I only had 1 year on the job, not even. I was a young recruit, I was working in the 19th district, and there was a call of a disturbance at the brown line, or it might have been the blue line, I don't remember what color, but one of the lines. For whatever reason, something triggered a gentleman, and he was under the turnstile, he was shaking, he was screaming, and people thought that he was, either drunk or high. They wanted us to rush in there and remove him. Thank goodness, by a mere fate, I was working with a person who had served in Vietnam. He recognized that this person was having a PTSD breakdown. We had not been trained in any of this at this point in time. But instead of just rushing in, grabbing his arm, throwing him to the ground, handcuffing him, removing him, throwing him on a wagon, which some officers could have done at that time, back in 1987, no one would have looked twice at it. He knelt down to the gentleman and said something to the effect of, where have you served? He named the platoon he served in. He built a bond with this gentleman where the gentleman just stood up and they walked away together, hand in hand, arms around each other. I just stood there in awe and still thinking to this day. I could almost be led to tears thinking about the wonderful efforts this officer made in relating to this gentleman instead of just rushing in and forcibly handcuffing the man and removing him from the scene. I'm kind of lost track here. I started babbling now, so excuse me. Yeah, as law enforcement officers, I always try to tell other officers too, especially young recruits that come in. And now that I guess I'm the veteran officer, that to use patience. And like I said, treat everybody as if they're a loved one. My mother now is currently 91 years old. And believe me, if there is a need for patience, it's when I deal with her. I mean, she's my mother, I love her to pieces, but very trying at times. She repeats herself over and over and over, and there's no filters. There are no filters. So if we go to a restaurant and she does not like what somebody is wearing, she says it just as loud as me. Oh my goodness, look at what that girl is wearing over there. And you're just like, oh my goodness. But so when dealing with people, we just have to have patience. We have to take our time. We have to show compassion. We don't know what shoes anybody else has walked in. So by applying the golden rule every day to every citizen that we encounter, our job becomes easier because we build the trust with the community that way. And that's something I've always tried to advocate, and I hope that's something that you've experienced with our officers here in the 17th District. We are currently, as the department is currently sending every officer to a 2-day force mitigation training. And what that means is the officers are going and they are relearning some of the things. Like I said, I came on in 1986. There was no training for anything with mental illness. There was no training for anything with autism. We are getting all that now to learn how to deal with people suffering from these illnesses and conditions. And in this 2-day training, everybody is getting put through scenarios, and they're kind of retraining us as to how we need to respond to these certain situations. I'm watching the little plates of food here.
Be safe,
But basically, as the other speakers have already mentioned, do unto others as you would like others to do unto you. As law enforcement officers, we realize that sometimes we're not going to have the others do unto us, but still, we want to do unto others. When Commander Bauer was killed in February, I know there was a lot of anger amongst the police officers, but I did not see anybody misuse their position. I mean, it would have been very easy for retaliation, for officers to become mad and be angry with community members. But I'd like to say that I'm proud that I've seen the golden rule applied in that instance, that they remain professional and courteous to officers in those conditions.
All right, thank you so much for that, Susan. And as you all have heard the terms golden rule along with compassion and empathy, tonight there's a very clear correlation between what this rule means and embodies. So our next speaker is Kara Wagner from St. John's Episcopal Church, and she was raised in a small Christian congregation of St. James in Marshall, Minnesota, and earned her Master of Divinity from Seabury Western Theological Seminary in 2003, and prior to that she taught elementary school in England, New York, and Chicago. She has served as campus minister at the Sacred Heart Schools in Chicago and has been head pastor at the St. John's Church since 2005. Where is Kara? Oh, there she is. Okay, thank you. Welcome.
Assalamu alaikum. I heard a story recently on This American Life about a young father who was learning a lot by raising his little girl. He discovered how 4-year-olds ask questions. And he took her to preschool, and he always went by a Christian church that had a large crucifix, Jesus up on the cross. And she was very curious. And he was not particularly religious, but he felt like he had to answer her questions. So she said, "Who is he, and what did he do?" And he answered her questions as best he could. And then one day, it was Martin Luther King Day, a January morning. Her preschool was off for the holiday. And so he took his 4-year-old daughter out for breakfast. And sitting at the table, there was a poster of Martin Luther King, and he said to his daughter, "That's the guy, that's the reason you don't have preschool today." And she said, "Well, who is he?" And he said, "Well, Martin Luther King preached that everybody should love each other and care for each other, no matter their color or race or culture or creed or anything else." And she said, "Oh, like Jesus?" And he said, "Oh yeah, like Jesus." And then she looked at his picture and she said, "Did they kill him too?" The golden rule is powerful. It's not just an easy saying that we memorize and think about fondly. It matters. One of the disadvantages of being the culturally religious dominant religion, being a Christian, is that we live in a nation that we sometimes call Christian, even when we do many things that do not hold up to Christian values. And there's also many ways in which, as a Christian, people assume things or assume they know things about Christianity, and so they kind of take away the power of our faith. So for instance, this morning scrolling through Facebook, I saw an incredible video taken in Norway of the world's tallest bonfire. It was an amazing structure of wood that they light every year, and it's in the Guinness Book of World Records. Well, it turns out that they do this every year on June 24th, the feast of St. John the Baptist. But in Norway, it's become more about building a bonfire than remembering that John the Baptist had the courage to call the Roman authorities immoral and unjust, and for that, he lost his head. The golden rule is not just an easy saying that we can memorize. It's powerful. What it means is being willing to sacrifice our own self, our own well-being, all that we love, for the sake of the other, no matter who the other is.
Thank you, Kara, for that beautiful perception, again, of the golden rule. Before our next speaker, I would like to share a brief message from Alderman Floreno, who was unable to attend tonight due to a prior conflict, but she sends her best wishes for a wonderful evening of fellowship and good cheer. Next, we have Diane Limas, who is from Communities United, and she's the board president and co-founder of Communities United, which is a grassroots social justice organization that develops institutions and community residents as leaders and unites people across all backgrounds, race, gender, income, and religion to improve people's lives. Diane has over 18 years of experience through her organization and was awarded the Chicagoan of the Year in 2009 for her dedication to housing issues. And just to note, she's also on the board of the Compassionate Care Network, Charity Care Coalition, and Sweet Home of Chicago, to name a few. There were like 10 things on there. I was like, all right, I'll say 3. So, thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Diane Limas. I'm a volunteer and board president for Communities United. We're a grassroots community organization located on the northwest side of Chicago. We work on several social justice issues, including preservation of affordable housing, education, healthcare, restorative justice, education, healthcare, youth issues, violence, and others. What do we mean? What do we mean when we refer to the golden rule? And we've heard it through the evening, right? Christianity, Islam, and Judaism, and in fact, every major religion promotes various interpretations of what we think of as the golden rule. Commonly expressed, as we heard through the evening, treat others as you wish to be treated. The Bible says, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And the Prophet Muhammad says, none of you truly believes until he wishes for his brother what he wishes for himself. The Golden Rule has been identified as the foundation that connects to justice. The concept of justice is rooted in the concept of the Golden Rule. Social justice, fair-mindedness, compassion, generosity, consideration for others, and loving kindness are divine attributes and qualities that connect directly to the Golden Rule. In fact, justice, as it pertains to the Golden Rule, prepares the way for unity. It is the equalizer in all human affairs. It can moderate the extremes of wealth and poverty, and it can help remove the hurdles of racial prejudice. Justice, as we see, the balance of truth and fairness. Living the Golden Rule can lead to protections for those that live in poverty, the young, the elderly, and the most vulnerable. The Golden Rule shows us that no one is more important than the other. It's a symbol of equality. It teaches us to fight against injustice. It does not advise us to do to others what we think would be good for ourselves, but to place ourselves in the position of others. We must treat all people with the same respect and regard as we ourselves want and deserve. However, we need to first understand and share the feelings of others. Many of our elected officials that we put in these positions, decision-making positions, are not putting themselves in another person's shoes. Some of them lack that ability. They don't seem to think about reversing their role when they seek to create policy that alienates, oppresses, discriminates, and causes great harm to the people that they were elected to serve. Government policies are meaningful only when they address the needs and concern of all the people. Now, how do Communities United connects to the Golden Rule and puts the Golden Rule to everything that we do? We fight for justice. We fight for justice for the families that are being displaced from their homes as gentrification takes over their neighborhood. We fight for young people that live in violence every day. We fight for justice for the immigrants, the undocumented families that have no access to health insurance and not even an ID to pick up their medication. We fight for a better criminal justice system and for money to fund our schools that our children get the education that they need to succeed in their life. We fight for jobs and fair wages so that all people can climb that ladder toward success and start to build wealth. How does Communities United get our elected officials to really understand the reality and the life and the struggles of the people? Well, we have families that live in these homes that are being displaced come out and tell their story in the form of a testimony. We hold press conferences so that the public, as well as the elected officials, can educate themselves on what justice means. The practice of justice is the sign of compassion in action. And yes, if needed, we demonstrate, we protest, so that our elected officials can truly understand the reality of the life and the struggles of all the people. CU works with elected officials to create equitable policies. We also create spaces for promoting opportunities for the voices of the underprivileged, the vulnerable, and the marginalized, so that they have a voice, that they can be heard. So, Communities United fights for justice every day, and we do this as it pertains to the Golden Rule. Thank you.
My name is Luis Sinchi with Communities United. I just have a quick announcement. As part of what our board president mentioned, this coming Saturday, June 9, we have an event at DePaul University, And I have some flyers with me today I would like to distribute. And also we wanted to let you know that we're going to have translation for the different communities that need this service, but also I have a sign-in sheet here. If you would like to come or you would like us to give you a call, just sign your name, your number, your email, and I will pass this to both sides of the aisle. Thank you.
Thank you, Diane, and thank you, Louise, for sharing your message about Communities United and the way that the Golden Rule applies to that. And now we have our final speaker, Brandon. His last name is Simons, in case anyone's suspense was really getting to someone. He is the pastor of the Christ Church of Chicago, UCC, and is a professional certified coach by helping clergy, caregivers, and hospice workers and religious organizations to become the best versions of themselves. It seems as though Brandon really embodies the Golden Rule in his work, and he is committed to social justice and seeks to make the world a better place for his 3 children. Well.
So I'm apparently the artist formerly known as Brandon. Or currently, I don't know. But assalamu alaikum. Thank you for having me here this evening. My faith journey took a lot of turns and went through a number of different paths. I grew up in a conservative Christian environment, but after undergraduate school, experiencing their God, so to speak, as a very judgmental, not very open, not so much into justice type of God, I kind of threw it all away and said I wanted nothing to do with this. And so I found myself in Japan for 5 years at a Buddhist temple. I was living there and working there. And one day I remember that this Buddhist priest came from the seminary in Kyoto. And as he came and gave his guest sermon, he said, "Otamajashi wa shizen ni kairu ni naru. Shikashi, ningen no akachan wa shizen ni ningen nashi ningen ni wa narenai." And that means that a tadpole will naturally become a frog, but a human baby will not naturally become a humane human being without first learning love, kindness, respect, and compassion. And he went on to say that, and when one can embody those things and learn and figure out that before we say or do anything, the effect we're going to have on those we're in relationship with, on those who are around us, he said that is enlightenment. That is what it means to become a Buddha. And when I heard this, I thought, wow, I think Jesus was probably saying the same thing until the church messed it all up. And not the first time. But it awoke me to this idea of interconnectedness, that we all were related in some way. And so this idea, this thought of the Golden Rule as Jesus is stating it, about doing unto others as you would have them do unto you, and going on to say, this is the law. This is the prophets. And so I thought about this, and I thought, well, this is starting to make sense, because as Japan is a collectivist culture, so were the Hebrew people. And where it was different when they were in Egypt and they had their own places to live and their own belongings, and then they find themselves out in the desert living in very close proximity to one another, where their belongings are just so close you can reach over and steal them if you wanted, along with somebody else's wife or whatever the case may be. Right? The world was very different for them at that time, and so they received the law. And as we think about the 10 Commandments, right? Don't steal, don't commit adultery, don't lie, don't covet your neighbor's wife, etc., etc. All these things, not just to say that if you do that, you're going to be punished, but to say if you do that, you are going to create this breaking of harmony in community. And you'll create a legacy that will live on, that will affect your children for years to come. Generations and generations will suffer for your acts. But if you sow the seeds of compassion, those too will create a legacy that will live on. Right? And so we get this idea among the Jewish people who, they said, who sinned? His mother or his father, right? With the blind person. This idea that sin and blessing are not just individual, but they're communal. But I think in our Western culture we have individualized this idea of the Golden Rule. Almost made it sound like some idea of karmic retribution. If I do something to somebody, I'm going to suffer, so I better not do it. It's not for their sake, it's for my own. Right? And I think that's how our Western culture tends to think of these things. But I'd rather think of it in terms of legacy. I'd rather think of it in terms of leaving a mark for the generations that creates the world and changes it into a better place for those who come after us. When my daughter Selah, who's sitting over there, she's 5 years old, when we pulled into the parking lot, she had a lollipop stick. And she got out of the car and I was just kind of watching to see what she'd do with it. And she handed it to me. I'm like, okay, good. She didn't throw it on the ground. And she says, yeah, you can't throw it on the ground because then the police will come. So as we're sitting over there, she pointed to this guy and said, who's got a gun? I said, yeah, that's the police. Apparently somebody else threw a lollipop stick on the ground. But I say that just to say that that simple act of throwing that lollipop stick on the ground has bigger consequences than just spoiling the ground under your feet, right? People who see you will learn from you. People who will come to that space later will find that it's been denigrated, right? So in all of these things that we do, it's not just the idea that I'm going to do this for myself so that the police don't come and arrest me, so that I don't get in trouble, so that I don't have some karmic retribution, but instead so that I can create a legacy, because I'm aware of my interconnectedness with all beings. And that if we do these things, we realize the deeper message, that it's not just about me, but instead it is about creating a world in our very own community where peace, love, justice, compassion, and kindness are not mere words, but they become a way of life. Thank you.
Break our fast, I want to introduce Amira Abu Qayyum, who is also a product of the MCC community. So Dr. Qamar Hussain, add her to your list. She is active in mosques and cultural clubs and is currently, next year she's going to be a senior at Lane Tech High School. So thank you, Amira.
I first want to start off by saying I'm very happy to see you all sitting here together today, because had actions like this not been practiced in our culture in Chicago, I wouldn't have been born. So I just wanted to say that. Okay, well, after a day of Siyam, which is fasting, those who have been fasting wait for the adhan for Maghrib to be called. Adhan is the Arabic word for call to prayer, and Maghrib prayer is the fourth prayer of the day that marks the end of Muslims' fasting period for that day. Upon hearing the adhan, most Muslims break their fast with dates and water, and we do this because Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, said, when one of you is fasting, he should break his fast with dates, but if he cannot get any, then he should break his fast with water, for water is purifying. An interesting fact, while it seems like a random recommendation to break your fast with dates, studies find that dates also help with hydration, since they are a natural source of glucose, which encourage your cells to store fluid and fuel for energy. Bet you didn't know that. After breaking fast, we perform Salat al-Maghrib, which is the fourth prayer of the day that I mentioned earlier. However, before that, we perform wudu, the act of physical cleansing in preparation for prayer. This is done by washing the face from ear, hairline to chin, including mouth and nose, hands and arms up to elbows, and feet up to ankles in a specific order. To perform prayer, we will go down into the prayer hall. There we will remove our shoes. Men and women pray separately, but in each section we will stand side by side. The Imam recites verses from the Quran, and then we will follow through the positions of standing, bowing, and prostrating, which is putting our forehead to the ground and then sitting. After we pray in congregation, people will pray an additional set on their own. After that, we will come back to this room and eat iftar for dinner, which I am very much looking forward to. I don't know about all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Amira. That was a very, I think, accurate description of what it looks like to open your fast during the month of Ramadan. And as she mentioned, we will hear the call to prayer. And once we do, then we can grab our date, which you all have in a cute little cupcake thing in front of you. Or if you don't want to, there's also fruit and water. Would you like to say something, Mrs. Uncle? No? Okay, I believe Mr. Sher Rajput uncle will be coming up to introduce someone.
Yes,
Okay.
please.
Sorry.
Give me 2 minutes.
Okay,
Or 1 minute.
take one.
Azan will be gone in 2 minutes.
Okay, so take 1.5.
Muhammad Rajput, I am the servant of all of you. And I'm also a servant of the interfaith. Every faith I follow. I had inviting the Archbishop, and we are honored to have him present to join us. He's got a long name, but starts with His Eminence, Archbishop, yes, Dr. Jacob Apoji. Agepo. Then next to him, I have VIPs. I have Babu Verma, who is also president of the Midwest Christian Society of Chicago. Please, Babu, can you stand up, please? Say hello to everyone. Archbishop, please get yes.
I'm the servant of all humanity. I am humanity. And God has blessed me as the Archbishop of the World Bishops' Council. Thank you. Thank you. Thank God for
Okay. We are honored to have you, Archbishop. Thank you, you made it. Next to him is the Prince of Patiala, Sardar Jatinder Singh Bedi. He is also coming up. Next to a very big shot, the Bhagavad Gita Society of Illinois, Anil Pillai. Please stand up, Anil. He is also chairman of the Federation of India Association. He spent half of his life serving humanity. We call him in Hindi, he's known as a Sevak. So, okay. Thank you. Bushra, I'm your friend.
Actually, you call, I was in the hospital. I will tell you that. No accident. No, oh my God, I'm a fan of yours.
Yeah. Tapping into the microphone works like a charm as well. In case anyone ever needs these tips, I'm here all night. But thank you all so much for attending our community iftar on behalf of MCC and the entire Muslim Community Center Interfaith and Outreach community at large. I'd like to give a special thank you to Bashir Uddin and Adid Amal Tayyiba's group because they provided the food. They had it catered, a lot of it was homemade, yeah. And something that was really nice was that they took in almost every dietary restriction that comes to mind into account by making sure we had special vegan options, we had special options where we didn't have, certain aromatic foods, so without garlic and leeks and onions. So thank them for that, for this delicious meal that we all just shared together. Yeah. So before I introduce Cindy Kuhn for our closing prayer, I wanted to sort of give a disclaimer that after this, the final prayer of the night, the fifth prayer, is Shah Salah. With that, we have a special Tarawih prayer that is read during the month of Ramadan will be beginning. And the mosque has probably never been more crowded. I think it even beats Friday prayer on most days. But with that being said, if your car is in the parking lot, then you might be trapped in there. So I'm not saying rush out of here if you're parked in there, but I kind of, just be aware of that and keep that in mind while you're networking and, enjoying your time here. So with that being said, we have Cindy Kuhn from the Urban Park Lutheran Church, and she will be doing our closing prayers. Thank you.
before we pray. I think I speak for everyone here. We are so grateful for your hospitality, share this moment with you, and thank you so very, very much. Let's pray. God of all creation, we stand in awe before you of the harmony of humanity. We are children of many traditions, inheritors of shared wisdom and tragic misunderstandings, of proud hopes and humble successes. Now it is time for us to part in memory and truth, in courage and trust, in love and promise. In all that we've shared, let us see the common prayer of humanity. In that which we differ, let us wonder at human freedom. In our unity and our differences, let us know the uniqueness that is God. May our courage match our convictions and our integrity match our hopes. May our faith in you bring us closer to each other. May our meeting with past and present bring blessing for the future. Amen.
How about a big round of applause for
How about a round of applause for Akhtar Sadiq? Please, one more time. Give him a lovely voice.